Alright, so the Eagles are back this week after their early season bye, and they're going to have a golden opportunity, as after all the early season struggles we've seen from them on both sides of the ball, they now get the chance to face one of the worst teams in football in the Cleveland Browns in what is the perfect get-right game for them, while also getting back several star players who are sure to give a much-needed boost to their team. However, despite this being the absolute perfect scenario for this team with where they're at this season, this could also turn into a nightmare scenario for head coach Nick Sirianni, as if things go south, it certainly feels like there's a chance that it could be the end for Nick and Philly. So we're going to talk about that and all the other latest Eagles news starting right now. Hey guys, welcome to the Philly Fan 21 channel. If you're new, I'm Evan and I cover all things Philadelphia Eagles. But before we get into any Eagles stuff, I got to give a quick shout out to Nick Castellanos and the Philadelphia Phillies for winning a thrilling game and tying up their series versus the Mets yesterday and bouncing back from the rough loss they took in Game 1. Speaking of which, Eagles head coach Nick Sirianni was in attendance for that one, and Philly Sports Twitter had some fun with that, noting that the Phillies offense struggled with Sirianni in attendance, and of course they also choked a small late lead. So it seems like coach just can't catch a break these days, but hey, that's just the way it goes in Philadelphia when you don't perform up to expectations. And I mean, it's kind of hard to argue that it's not warranted, as probably the biggest reason for the Eagles' struggles, not just this season, but also going all the way back to last year, is Nick Sirianni and the mistakes he's made. Whether it's bad decision-making during games, poor offensive play calling and game planning, and now seemingly just inserting himself into the offense too much, along with also just not having the team well enough prepared for games. I mean, it's safe to say that Sirianni has not been good enough in a lot of areas, and the fans are getting pretty fed up with it. That being said, though, Sirianni still has a golden opportunity coming off this bye week to turn things around, as like I've mentioned multiple times in previous videos, the Eagles have a super easy stretch of games coming off the bye, and overall, the easiest remaining schedule in the entire NFL. So, if they can take advantage of that and get things right, they still very well could compete for the NFC East Division title and make a playoff push. And speaking of the NFC East and the state of the Birds division right now, let's take a look back at Sunday's slate of games, starting with the Giants vs. Seahawks matchup, where surprisingly, even without Malik Neighbors, the Giants were able to go on the road and beat a Seahawks team that started the season 3-0 and came in 3-1. And Daniel Jones and the New York offense were pretty solid, so they moved to 2-3 on the season, and they're now just a half game behind the Eagles in the standings. Meanwhile, the Cowboys took on the Steelers on Sunday Night Football, and this ended up being a very interesting game as well, as neither team looked particularly great, and for the Cowboys, Dak Prescott had two pretty bad interceptions, but he did come through when it mattered, saving a fumble in the red zone and then throwing the game-winning touchdown pass on 4th down. So Dallas was then able to move to 3-2 and pull half a game ahead of the Eagles in the standings. But then for what I think was the most important NFC East game of the weekend, we look at the Commanders matchup with the Browns, as of course the Commanders went into the game leading the division and one game ahead of the Eagles, while the Browns will be the Birds' opponent next week. So from that perspective, this matchup was going to be very interesting to kind of gauge where both teams were at. And this game honestly was never really a contest, as Washington pretty much dominated from start to finish on both sides of the ball, while Cleveland looked terrible, and Jayden Daniels continued to look really, really good. Now, maybe not quite as good as in previous weeks, as his completion percentage was the lowest it's been so far, and he did have the interception early in the red zone, but he did respond very, very nicely, as once again, he had a few really nice deep balls, and also some impressive plays running the football, and the Commanders eventually came away with the 34-13 win. So, this game just adds on to what has been a really impressive start for Daniels in Washington, as they are now 4-1, which leads the NFC East, and Jayden Daniels is clearly the favorite for Rookie of the Year right now, so he deserves a ton of credit. And the Washington coaching staff does too, and you know who that includes? Former Eagles offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach Brian Johnson. And this is very interesting, as of course I'm sure all Eagles fans can remember how much hate and blame Brian Johnson was getting for the Eagles offensive struggles last year. Heck, I was one of the people blaming him and calling for his job. Yet now he's in Washington as the assistant head coach and the passing game coordinator, and he's played an integral part in helping Jayden Daniels and the Commanders offense get out to a lightning fast start, while the Eagles offense meanwhile is still struggling and seeing a lot of the same issues it had last year when Johnson was here. So that's just another sign that the true issue with the offense was never in fact Brian Johnson, and it's been Nick Sirianni creating the issues this whole time. But despite all that, and even though the Commanders are sitting atop the NFC East and also 1.5 games ahead of the Eagles right now, the Birds and Nick Sirianni are going to have a chance to get right against the team that the Commanders just beat in the Cleveland Browns, and this is the perfect opportunity for them to bounce back from a rough loss after a bye week and just start to build some momentum and establish an identity. As the Browns are just a bad football team based on the first 5 weeks of the season, they've obviously only won one game so far. They looked hopeless versus the Commanders yesterday, and despite their defense holding up at certain times, it certainly seems like they have taken a little bit of a step back, and the offense, on the other hand, looks absolutely terrible. I mean, they're probably one of the worst offenses in the entire NFL, and Deshaun Watson looks absolutely horrible. I mean, I don't know what happened to the guy that was lighting up defenses down in Houston, but this guy in Cleveland doesn't look anything like that. So this should be a great opportunity for the Eagles defense to have a dominant performance after their terrible showing versus the Bucs in week 4. And for the offense, they're expecting to get some of their best weapons back in AJ Brown and DeVonta Smith, along with their best offensive lineman in Lane Johnson. So this is a chance for kind of a fresh start in a way, and hopefully they'll have a bounce back performance as well. But while this is a golden opportunity for the Eagles coming off their bye week, this also could be an absolute nightmare for Nick Sirianni if things go south, and I think it could even cost him his job. So don't worry, we're going to get into that and so much more in just a minute, but real quick, I do want to say, if you are enjoying this video and don't want to miss any other Eagles coverage or content just like this coming throughout this entire season, then make sure you subscribe, and also really importantly, turn on notifications so you're notified instantly when one of these videos is uploaded. I think that's a win-win for the both of us, because not only do I get more people consistently watching these videos, but you don't miss any other Eagles coverage or content just like this. So again, subscribe, turn on notifications, and also drop a like. Let's see if we can get to 700 likes on this video. And now, with all that being said, let's get back into the video. So like I said, going up against a team like the Browns coming off the bye week that is absolutely horrible is certainly an ideal situation for the Eagles, who are in desperate need of a bounce back after what happened just 2 Sundays ago down in Tampa Bay. I mean, the Birds just need to start fixing some of their issues on both sides of the ball, and they also just kind of need to start finding their identity as a team. So obviously, going up against a bad football team coming off a bye week where hopefully you've already made some significant adjustments is a great chance to do that, and also a great chance to get what should be an easy win. But then you also got to look at the other side of that. Like, what if the Eagles came out versus the Browns at home and they gave us another uninspired performance where the team doesn't look ready to play, they don't look prepared, they look bad fundamentally, and they continue to make the same stupid mistakes that have plagued them ever since the collapse began last season? And worst of all, I mean, what if they were to do all that and also lose the game? Well, in that scenario, I honestly think some major changes could be made. I mean, this is pure speculation on my part, I'll definitely admit that, and I'm not even saying this would happen if the Eagles lost the game, but it ended up being a hard-fought contest, and they clearly fixed a lot of their issues. But I am saying, if the Eagles were to fall flat against this Browns team that has no business beating them, and the same coaching issues are still clearly there, then why shouldn't the Eagles fire Nick Sirianni at that point? Like, if all that were to happen, it'd just be really hard to imagine him being able to come back from something like that. Like, the Eagles got the easiest schedule in the NFL moving forward, and if Sirianni can't get things right in that stretch, then I just doubt he ever would be able to. So, I mean, in my mind, Sirianni's seat is already scalding hot, and if the Eagles were to lose this game and the same coaching issues were still present, then I just don't really see a reason for the Eagles to keep him around. But hey, that's all just my opinion and speculation. I could be way off, but you guys can let me know your thoughts down in the comments. Do you think Nick Sirianni would be fired if the Eagles lost their next game? And I mean, you guys probably know I hate asking that question and talking like this, because at one point I was somebody who loved Nick Sirianni. Like, I thought he brought the perfect energy and attitude as the head coach of this team, and I just thought he fit Philly really well, as he embraced this city from day one. And as much as some people hated his antics on the sidelines and the trash talking and all that, I personally loved it. And I'm also sure that he's just a great guy. I mean, there's a reason his players all seem to like him and stick up for him, but at the end of the day, like, he's just not doing a good enough job right now, and that's really what matters. So now here we are, and he's just gonna have to respond to this adversity if he wants to save his job, and again, it all starts this week. Speaking of which, the Eagles will be back out on the practice field this week in preparation for their matchup with the Browns after not practicing at all during their bye week, despite their clear issues and some calls too by the fans. But the good news is that, like I mentioned earlier, a few key players will almost 100% be back out there, and that of course includes AJ Brown, who we haven't seen since week 1. Now, before the Bucs game, he did practice that Friday and he was limited, so I'd now imagine that almost 2 weeks later, he'd be 100% ready to go come the team's first practice this week, which I think is going to be on Wednesday. And as much as the offense has had its struggles separate from Brown's absence, including the game planning and play calling at times, there is absolutely no denying that getting Brown back is going to give them a significant boost. I mean, the Eagles have just really not fared well when he's been out ever since he got here in 2022, as he's missed 5 games since then, and in those games, the Eagles have averaged just 14.2 points and 196.2 passing yards per game. And just this season, in the game that he did play in, they put up 34 points, while in the games that he missed, they only put up 21, 15, and 16. So again, safe to say say, getting him back is going to give them a tremendous boost. And the same goes for getting DeVonta Smith and Lane Johnson back, as they'll surely also provide a much needed boost to the offense as well. And I would also expect Jalen Hurts to be better with all these guys back. So hopefully that's the case and the offense has a bounce back game. And then defensively, the Birds are going to get Sidney Brown back, so I'll be really excited to see how they use him this week. And then again, probably even more so than the offense, they have a huge opportunity to bounce back as well, because again, the Browns offense is one of the worst in the entire league. Deshaun Watson has just been horrible, and he's also been sacked a lot. In fact, he's been sacked 26 times in 5 games so far. So for the Eagles and their defensive line and pass rush, again, this is going to be a golden opportunity, and we'll see what they do with it. And I'm of course going to be covering all the news leading up to the Eagles and Browns matchup, as well as just all the other Eagles news coming throughout this entire season. So again, if you don't want to miss any of that, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. And also make sure you guys drop a like to show some support if you did enjoy this video. I'd greatly appreciate it, and it really does help me out a ton. Again, let's see if we can get to 700 likes on this video. And also just leave a comment regarding anything that I talked about in this video. And if you want to watch another video going over some other Eagles news from earlier last week, you can check this out right here. And now with all that being said, that's pretty much all I got for this one, guys. So thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.